Taran Noah Smith was only 7 when he was cast to play Mark, the youngest of the 3 Taylor boys, on Home Improvement. Since many of the cast members of that show went on to appear in bigger and better things, it makes you wonder why we haven't heard Smith's name recently. Join Factsverse as we present Taran Noah Smith is not the same kid from Home Improvement anymore. Home Improvement consumed Taran Noah Smith's childhood. Taran was born April 8, 1984 in San Francisco. When he was 7, he was discovered by ABC talent scouts and hired to play Mark Taylor on Home Improvement. He played the youngest of 3 boys to Tim and Jill Taylor. His older 2 brothers were Brad and Randy. Home Improvement was a fairly popular weekly sitcom that aired for 8 seasons. Tim Taylor was the patriarch. He was also a man's man who hosted a weekly DIY home improvement show. On that show within a show, Tim was accompanied by his co-host Al Borland, portrayed by Richard Kern. While the majority of Home Improvement episodes centered around Alan and Richardson's characters, over the course of the show's 8-season run, Taran Noah Smith, as Mark, had plenty to do. Early in the series, he was more or less background filler, but as we watched him mature before our eyes, more plot lines revolved around his ever-growing character. While Taran has never come out and said his time on the sitcom was bad, in fact, he's been quoted as saying he loved his time on the show. The problem was, despite his love for the series, he spent his entire childhood on set. At the end of the day, he essentially grew up on the Disney lot. Smith's troubles began shortly after the series ended. His mom, Candy Benici, told the Marin Independent Journal that after the series ended, she thought he had the hardest time readjusting to a life post-Home Improvement. Everyone else who had appeared on the show had a life before it began, but Smith's entire life and everything he knew was suddenly gone virtually overnight. Candy said that after a show like Home Improvement ends, the actors get their ID cards taken away and they can no longer go back on the lot. Obviously, this abrupt change will have a profound effect on someone who essentially doesn't know what a normal life looks like. 8 years on a TV program can teach you a lot, especially if you started appearing at age 7. For Smith, he was given the rare opportunity to see how much of the behind-the-scenes gears and mechanisms work that go into making a TV show. It was for this reason that he decided he wanted to take a stab at being a director. After all, he had pretty much grown up seeing and taking careful mental notes on how TV shows were made. Things got ugly. After Home Improvement wrapped, Smith enrolled at the University of Southern California in their film program. But as it turned out, he was biting off more than he could chew. Instead of focusing his attention on his studies, he met a vegan chef named Heidi Van Pelt and fell deeply in love with her. They met at a dinner party Van Pelt held at her home, and it didn't take long for sparks to fly. While love shouldn't be problematic, there was one glowing issue with their relationship. She was a full 15 years older. At the time they began their relationship, Smith was 17, Van Pelt was 33. He knew his parents wouldn't approve of his new relationship, so he lied and told them she was only 9 years older than he was. And that age gap was the same as the distance between Smith's parents, so he figured by fudging the numbers a bit, he'd be able to make this revelation a tad more palatable. But Smith's parents eventually figured out he was lying, and that's when they attempted to push her out of his life. But teenagers being teenagers, Smith wasn't going to sit back and let that happen. He was in love and wasn't about to let his parents dictate who he could share his love with. So he made a choice and decided to drop out of school and be with the woman who would ultimately become his new wife. Immediately, Smith's fans began to express their concerns. The age difference was one thing, but many believed Van Pelt was actually going after his money. Smith ended up going to court to be emancipated. This would have allowed him to gain access to his $1.5 million trust fund a year before he would have otherwise. And since he ended up marrying Van Pelt, this ultimately meant she would have been given access to these funds too. Things took an ugly turn when Smith accused his parents of living off the money he had earned from his time on the sitcom. He went as far as accusing them of squandering his fortune. The fight between Smith and his parents got heated, but to this day, Candy Benici denies taking any of Smith's money. She claims it was placed in a trust fund, and they wouldn't have even been able to touch it even if they wanted to. The reason they put up a fight in court when he was 17 wasn't because they didn't want him to have his money. Rather, she claims that she and her husband were trying to protect it, so Smith didn't end up losing it to bad decisions. In the end, the Marin courts didn't grant Smith access to his money at that time, but that didn't stop accusations from flowing. Van Pelt denies she was ever going after Smith's fortune. In one interview with the Marin Independent Journal, she said she was never trying to usurp anyone's money. She said she had always done her own thing on her own strengths and has never relied on others for help. She noted she had her own way of generating income, but Smith didn't have a job and was quickly running out of money. The only way she and Smith thought they could remedy this situation was by trying to access his trust fund as a means of survival. When Smith turned 18, he gained access to his cash and was made a millionaire overnight. He then teamed up with his wife to form a company called Play Food in Kansas City. The company manufactured vegan, non-dairy cheeses out of cashews. According to Chef Van Pelt, Smith decided to help her form the company after he received his trust fund money, and then he went into things with, quote, eyes wide open. Later on, Smith realized his eyes were perhaps a little too open, because after being together for 6 years, they split up. At that point, Smith says he realized he had made a pretty big mistake. He said it was at this time his parents finally came around and were ready to forgive Van Pelt and welcome her into the family. When they came to him and told him their feelings on Van Pelt had changed, he revealed they'd already broken up. Before this, Smith and his parents had already patched things up and were on good terms. Smith later said that during the whole courtroom trust fund debacle, he was just going through a teenage phase. Now that he was a bit older and wiser, he realized his parents were never doing anything wrong and were just trying to protect him. He apologized to his parents, and they forgave him and apologized as well. He's moved on. Since breaking things off with Van Pelt, Smith has gone on to accomplish quite a bit in life. He's never returned to acting, but it does seem as if he's actively chasing his passions. In 2014, Smith volunteered doing disaster relief with a nonprofit called Communitaire in the Philippines. He's also worked as a technical manager for another organization called the Community Submersibles Project. In that role, he has taught people how to pilot submarines. In 2015, he backed his mother's book, Stardom Happens, Nurturing Your Child in the Entertainment Business. In 2022, Smith joined Elon Musk's Hawthorne, California-based aerospace company SpaceX as an integration technician. Taran Noah Smith hasn't stood in front of a film set camera since 1999. And while his life has had many twists and turns since then, it seems as if he's finally gaining some stability while leaning into his talents. Growing up on the set of a hit TV show must be incredibly disorienting, especially when it comes to an end. But at least Smith seems to have found his place in life, even if they aren't how he expected them to. Now it's time to hear from you. Did you know Taran Noah Smith quit acting after Home Improvement and that he's now working for SpaceX? Let us know in the comments section below.